was me, that is Alex, and my three droogs, that is Pete, Georgie, and Dim. And we sat in the Corova milk bar trying to make up our razoo docs what to do with the evening. The Corova milk bar sold Milk Plus, which is what we were drinking. This would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of the old ultra-violence. It was the next day, brothers, and I had truly done my best morning and afternoon to play it their way and sit like a horror show cooperative malchick in the chair of torture while they flashed nasty bits of ultra-violence on the screen. Though not on the soundtrack, my brothers, the only sound being music.
These eyes will deceive you. They will destroy you. They will take from you your innocence, your pride, and eventually your soul. These eyes do not see what you and I see. Behind these eyes, one finds only blackness, the absence of light. These are the eyes of a psychopath. Michael was created by a perfect alignment of interior and exterior factors gone violent.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Mr. Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah!
How's it going?
Good, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Is this on? Little blue button.
Do we need it?
It's not that big. I've played bigger theaters than this without microphone.
So we'll start off with something kind of easy. When did you first learn that you were interested in going in front of the screen, being an
I
actor?
thought he was talking without his mouth.
That's a trick we did.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, what was the question?
When did you first realize you wanted to be in front of the screen, in front of the camera? Well, when did you realize you wanted to become an actor?
Is that 3 questions or is it a trick question?
It's a trick.
Okay. Well, you know, I was an 11-year-old schoolboy, and you know, I was in church with the whole school were in church, and we were singing the hymns. And because as an 11-year-old schoolboy, I was fairly bored with the scriptures. So the only thing that really interested me was belting out a good tune, which happened to be hymns, and I've always been fond of hymns. And the headmaster, who was a big theatre man, was standing behind me. I didn't really know this, and so he cast me in a musical at the school. And from that moment on, I think I decided that I wanted to be an actor. So I think from the age of 11, I kind of knew sort of where my career might go if all else failed. So there you go.
Two of your most well-known early works, Clockwork Orange, Caligula, were highly publicized for both their shocking content and heavy censorship. Were you outwardly looking for roles that really shook up the system?
Well, one doesn't look for a role to be censored. No, and by the way, you've left off that list the best one of all, which is called If. If and Oh Lucky Man are the 2 best films. They're way better than Clockwork Orange. Obviously, there are intelligent people here in the Midwest. Thank you for that. But actually, the truth is, if you see the work of Lindsay Anderson and the work that I did with him, they're really groundbreaking movies of the time. And Kubrick saw If, cast me, you know, and I just went to meet him. He gave me a copy of the book. And, but this is not the question you asked me. I just answer any old question that I like, really.
You're allowed.
But did I? No, I didn't go looking for these parts. They found me.
So, after watching A Clockwork Orange, nobody can listen to Singing in the Rain the same way ever again. And it's been said that this was completely your idea. So what made you think that this song felt right in this legendary scene?
Well, it's true that I came up with the idea of this, but it wasn't like I'm a genius or something. And, you know, the point was that we were looking for some way to do this scene of a rape and a beating of the writer, this intellectual. And, you know, we were, I think, 6 weeks into the making of the movie, which, by the way, went on for like 8 months or something for shooting. And that was a quick Kubrick movie. There is a story that Matthew Modine tells about Full Metal Jacket that his wife was expecting a baby, and he said to Stanley, "Do you mind if I take Friday off?" And he goes, "Well, gee, Matthew, why?" He goes, "Well, it's my first child, you know." And he goes, "Well, can you postpone it till Monday?" He goes, "No, Stanley, you know, no, they can't postpone it. She's having a child." He goes, "Well, what are we shooting?" He goes, "The scene on the wall, by the wall." And Stanley goes, "We'll be finished with that by, you know." He goes, "Well, I can't, Stanley. I'm going to have to go." So he left. They were shooting that scene on that wall for the next 3 months. Stanley thought it would be over in 3 days. So that just shows you. He wasn't quite as bad when I worked with him, but I mean, he didn't do 50 takes and all that, hundreds of takes. I mean, what kind of a grinding is that? That's ridiculous. You know, that's where Stanley needed a producer to say, "Cut the crap, Stan." But unfortunately, by then, he was a god. And he could be told by no man, no mortal man. He was full of crap. Yes. Did I answer the question?
That's perfect.
I thought I answered another question brilliantly. What are you looking at these pads for?
We've actually prepared questions for you, believe it or not.
I gotta come here and you're way ahead of the people in Hollywood with your little gizmos. I'm impressed.
You could put in a good word for us in Hollywood.
So, you know, Kubrick wanted you to play Alex after seeing prior performances. How did he approach you for the role, and what were your feelings of the role when you read the script for the first time?
Well, it wasn't prior performances. I have to just clarify that. You know, I was a very young actor. I'd just done a movie called If, which went on to win the grand prize at the Cannes Film Festival. Rather surprisingly, actually. And suddenly, you know, we were flavor of the month. And so this is what Christiana Kubrick, Stanley's widow, told me happened. And she told me this only 5 years ago, so I'll pass it on. Stanley had at his house a projectionist on call 24/7. So if the great man wanted to see any movie, he could just see it. It's not like today, we just put it in on DVD. Projectionist, the whole damn rigmarole, you know. So he wanted to see this movie that people were talking about, If. And so one evening, they were all gathered. They had a print of the movie sent up from Paramount. They put it on. And this is what Christiana told me, is that I was in the first scene in the movie that I'm in, came in, did the whole thing, and he watched it. He hit the intercom button and told the projectionist to go back and relace that reel. He did that, so he saw it again, and he did it 4 times. After the 4th or 5th showing, he looked at Christiana and said, "We found our Alex." Thank God he did. Changed my life.
So, A Clockwork Orange, the novel from Anthony Burgess, there's really there's a made-up language, the NASDAQ, this dictionary of slang. How did that work into preparing for the role, and what did you use from the novel to prepare for the role?
I actually had the novel with me at all times, but you know, one has to be careful. You know, you think you're going to find the answer to it in a novel, because that's not going to happen. You know, that's a bit too methody for my way of working. The whole thing, you know, is really, what is this movie about? And of course I read the novel, and by the way, when I first read the novel, I couldn't understand a damn word of it. Then I read it again, and I thought, that's pretty cool story. When I read it a third time, I realized what a damn great part it was. But I was going out to Kubrick's house every day. He lived an hour out of London, so it was a pain in the ass. But I'd have to drive out there, we'd talk about costume and this and that, whatever. And so I asked him one day when I was out there, you know, what he thought the character, you know, was. And he just looked at me and he goes, gee, Malk, that's why I hired you. So that was as far as I was going to get with any direction from the director, right? So I went to my great friend who directed If, and I asked him to read the script, and he did, and I went round to see him. And the first thing he said was, thank God I don't have to shoot this movie. Where I went, oh, gee. I said, look, Lindsay, it's not your kind of material, but can you help me? I mean, what? Just give me something. And he said, well, Malcolm, there's a shot in it, a close-up, when you open the gymnasium doors to be beaten by the prefects, and you look at them and you smile. He said, that's the way you play this part. And I went, oh my God, what a genius piece of direction. It's so simple. You know, it's so simple, it's perfect. And all the anxiety I had about it went away. And, you know, I remembered it the first day, and I remembered it explicitly, exactly as he said. Got through the first day, and I never, ever remembered it again. And weirdly, it was only years later when I was sort of kind of thinking about events, and I suddenly realized that this had taken place on what Lindsay had said to me. But it was very interesting because the first day was a little tricky because it was the doctor coming into the Ludovico. After I'd had the Ludovico treatment, she comes in and says, how are you today, little Alex? And I went, well, I'm fine, you know. I felt a bit sick, going through all that. And she then gives me a shot in my ass. And Stanley had decided that he wanted me to take a real shot in the ass. I said, can't we use one of those, you know, folding needles? No. So this actress, whose name was Madge Ryan, an Australian actress, a wonderful actress. I was doing other scenes, and I'm running from one set to the other. We were in a hospital, corridors, and I walked down the corridor, and she's in the corridor with a hypodermic needle and an orange, shoving in the orange and practicing. And as I walked past, I went, oh, is that me? As a joke. She said, yes. No joke. So we come to do the scene. Don't forget, I'm remembering Lindsay Anderson's note, smile. So she asked me to take my pants down. Down goes the pajamas. I offer my bum to her. And I see she is now shaking, there's sweat forming. She's not a doctor, she's an actress, right? She's now been asked to do, you know, what a doctor or a nurse would do. So she gets this thing, and they've obviously said to her, make sure you don't screw around to make sure you get that damn needle in there. So she threw this thing into my ass like it was a rhino with a thick fucking crust. It went so far into my ass that it literally went into the hilt. But I remember the note. Keep smiling. Now also, she was told by the doctor just to let it was purified water, just to let it in very slowly, otherwise a huge welt will appear. Because she was so nervous, shh. Oh. Remember the note. Smiling until, yeah! That was the end of that. And I had a huge welt on my ass, this like bubble. And so it took a couple of hours for it to go down. And then, of course, he used the retractable needle. There you are. I smiled as long as I could.
One of the more dilemmas about the film is about the government coming in and developing this technique and using it to take someone's free will away. And when the movie's released, the government comes in and tells you what people can watch on the film. Do you think that this irony is lent to the longevity of the film?
Well, I'd like to be outraged, but I can't be. Because all they were asking was 12 seconds to be cut from a nude scene. You know what you Americans are like with nudity, you know. You're Puritans. I mean, you don't mind seeing butchery, mayhem, and murder, and all the rest of it, but you see a tit, and you get into a right little dizzy. So, I think there was genitalia cut out. Ooh dear, you know, a man's actually got a dick between his legs. I think we've all seen that before. But no, the government wanted that out. So, hey, but it didn't really affect anything on the movie, so who cares, you know? So it went from an X to a, whatever, an R, you know, in just overnight, 12 seconds. And Stanley was happy to do it. I don't know why he didn't do it before, because unfortunately, for the Academy Awards, most of the members of the Academy were 75 plus. That seemed to be what was happening those days, you know. They'd had their Academy cards pretty much all their lives, and so they wouldn't go near an X film, so I think we really suffered, because it didn't, I don't think, well, I certainly wasn't nominated. Kubrick, I don't think was. And I don't think the film was, you know, it's staggering, but they are. So, anyway.
And you did a great job of sort of bringing the humor out of Alex's role, you know, but it was overshadowed by violence and sex. But would you consider it really being the darkest comedy ever made?
Probably not. No, I don't think so, but I can't think of any other. But at the time, you know, at the time, it was so radical that it was beyond belief. Because the only way I could really play this immoral character was to not to pander to the audience. I decided, you know, that I would just make him love his life. And, you know, if you see someone enjoying their life, there's something infectious about it, even if they're raping and beating. And that's why I suddenly thought of Singing in the Rain, because, you know, it's Gene Kelly's fault. They gave us Singing in the Rain, and, you know, that was the propaganda from Hollywood for Euphoria. That's what they put out there. And so everybody, all of us, all over the world, looked at that movie, saw Gene Kelly splashing down that street with the cop, the lamppost, the whole deal. By the way, I swung on that lamppost and it wasn't attached. Damn thing fell over. On the back of Warner. But, so, to me, that was Euphoria. You know, that was when man was at his happiest. And that's why I started to singing in the rain. Kubrick went off and bought the rights, and we then shot the whole sequence. Took a week.
What did Gene Kelly think about you using the song?
Gene, dear Gene, what an incredible talent. A year later, I was invited to come to Hollywood to meet the the guys who are running the studio, because the film was a huge hit, the biggest hit they had that year. And so, I had a minder who was taking me around, and he said, "Hey, Malcolm, there's a party in Beverly Hills in the flats tonight. Would you like to go? There'll be a lot of movie stars there." And I went, "Yeah, movie stars. Oh, yeah, I'd love to meet some movie stars." So we go there. He gets me a drink, and he said, "Oh, Malcolm, you listen, Gene Kelly's here. You want to meet him?" I went, "Yeah, please." So we went up, and he had his back to me, and he tapped him on the shoulder, and as he turned around, he said, "Gene, I want you to meet Malcolm McDowell." Well, he looked at me like I had crawled out from a rock. There was a long, pregnant pause when he took in my face. He really looked me up and down, and then he turned and walked away. And a complete and utter insult. And the minder started to apologize. And I went, "Hey, forget it. Are you kidding? You don't have to apologize for him. I mean, he had it first. I should be getting on my knees and thanking him." I wasn't offended at all. I was a little bit thrown, but not offended, because I totally understood where he came from. And anyway, I didn't think too much of it. So 40 years later, I am telling that story at the Academy on Wilshire. And afterwards, I was getting ready to go home, and some lady comes up to me and she said, "Malcolm, I'm Gene's widow." And she goes, "He wasn't pissed with you. He was pissed with Stanley." And I said, "Well, why was that?" She goes, "Well, he never paid him." So I thought, well, that's our Stanley.
So I read that your pet snake on the film got out at some point. Is that true?
You did what?
The snake in the film, it disappeared for a moment. Was that true on set?
It did. It did, for a brief moment. Got curled up under the bed. Not a very nice thing. You open the drawers, pick the prop out of the thing, and the prop has decided to wind itself around the underside of the bed. And I'm thinking it's going to come up and bite my ass. So I did one of those girly things. Woo! And ran out. Let somebody else deal with it. Which they did.
So how long would you say you were actually trapped in that chair? And is it true that...
What chair?
For the Ludovico technique.
A very, very short time.
And is it true that you actually had an injury from that to your eye?
Yeah. No, the thing was that Kubrick showed me a picture of a patient with these lid locks in his eyes. And I didn't get it at first while he was showing me. And I went, "Oh yeah, nice. And he goes, "Great. So you don't mind?" I went, "No." "Don't mind what?" He goes, "Well, having that." I went, "But that, I'm not going to do that." He goes, "Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I've got a doctor coming out tomorrow from Moorfields Eye Hospital who is going to, take you through it and tell you." I went, "Stanley, I think that looks awfully dangerous. I mean, your eyes, you don't screw with your eyes." Anyway, the doctor comes out and goes, "Oh, no, we do these operations all the time. You just put a little anesthetic in the eye, you'll never even feel it." So, what am I going to do, I said, "Okay, So we get to the day. Of course, the doctor had put these lid locks, as they're called, into patients having eye operations, but they're normally lying flat on their back. They're not sitting up watching a bloody movie. And in a straitjacket to boot, with things on and all the rest of it. So anyway, he put the put the anesthetic in my eye, put the lid locks in there. You know, he said, look, I have to put these drops, artificial teardrops in your eyes every 14 seconds because you don't want the cornea drying up. And I go, why is that, Doc? And he goes, well, you'll lose your sight. I went, oh, Jesus. Okay, great. Well, so we're about to start shooting. Kubrick walks down and gives the damn doctor, who was a real doctor, a line of dialogue. So now he's obsessing on his damn line of dialogue, which was totally meaningless, instead of getting the fucking eye drops in my eyes every 14 seconds. And I'm counting. You know, I was counting the seconds going by, going, Doc, get it in. And he's going, what was your name again? But he only had to say, how's it going today, little Alex? And I went, Alex, who cares? Just get the damn drops in. Anyway, we did it. Kubrick sees of course, the anesthetic wore off, you know, eventually wore off. These things, by the way, would fall out, and I didn't feel it. It was just scraping down my corneas. And, you know, driving home that night, I came into my street and there was a pothole. And the pain was like an open razor blade being ripped down my body. It's you don't want to scratch a cornea, and it was a nightmare. And luckily, you know, I managed to call my doctor, and he just lived around the corner, and he rushed around with his bag, and he gave me a shot of morphine. But thank God, because I've never felt pain like that. It's horrible. But you know, the eye, it heals itself very fast, and by the next day, I had no pain at all. So, but just scratchy stuff. But then, of course, I go in, and Kubrick says, "Oh, you know, I've seen the dailies. It looks great, but I need a close-up." And I looked around. I went, "See my stand-in, John? He's got blue eyes. Why don't you do a close-up on his eye? Let somebody else have a good time with that." He said, "Mark, no, I can't. You know, I got to be you." So and he was badgering me all the time. So I just said, "Look, Stan, I'll do it at the end of the movie. I'm not doing it now." And of course, when the end of the movie finally came, I didn't think it would ever come to an end, because Kubrick's movies never do. But of course, eventually, there it was. The next day was the last day. And he goes, "You ready for the lid locks?" I thought he'd forgotten. I went, "Oh, God." And I can tell that close-up I look 80 years old, because I know what's coming.
Now, you said that Stanley was a little more relaxed, a little less obsessive in this film. But the scene when you release and you find your old droogs and they're drowning you, how did that go, and how many times did you have to take that?
We couldn't do that too many times, actually. I think it just took the morning, you know, which for Kubrick was very fast. You know, what they did was, it was so cold, because it was shot in November or something, in the winter in England, damp, cold, horrible. They dunked my head in this tank and hold it down. But in the tank, they had an oxygen cylinder with a mouthpiece. Now, I don't know whether you've ever bobbed for apples. It's a little similar, trying to find this damn thing so I can take some air. And we took a few takes before I even got the mouthpiece in my mouth. But once they were beating me, you know, it was there for 2 minutes, and it looks like I'm holding my breath. In fact, I'm not. But it was pretty effective. It was a good scene.
So, you've done a lot of voice acting in your life. What is voice acting and narration, I should say? What is the most you've enjoyed portraying? Personal favorite of ours is President Eaton from Fallout 3.
Isn't that funny? You should say that, because I knocked that off in 2 hours.
What?
Yeah.
It's a huge role.
I've never played the game, but I'm pleased that people love Fallout 3, in case you're interested. I was shocked at first when people kept coming up and saying, love Fallout 3, and I'm like, I wasn't in that. I didn't even know the name of the game. You know? I just went in, it was booked to do it, bang, you know. But it was very well written, and I kind of had I had Ronald Reagan in my mind, you know, when I did it. So I was having kind of fun with it. I do love doing narrations and stuff because it's such a different character, and it lends so much. The first one I did was for a movie, the first real documentary they did about the Beatles called The Complete Beatles. And if you can ever find it online, you should get it. Because it's really, I watched it. I couldn't find it randomly. I met somebody on Mozart in the Jungle who knew the director. And I said, oh, will you ask him if he has a copy? Will he send me one? And he sent me one. And we watched it, you know, a month or so ago for the first time, you know, since the 70s. I guess 80s. It was 80s. Early 80s, which is when I did it. And it's a fantastic thing with John, you know, the whole deal. So that's when I started doing them, and I really do enjoy them. And you know, Clockwork Orange is a huge amount of voiceover, and that is the sort of soul of the character. It's kind of cool.
You talked about doing the Beatles documentary. I read that, didn't you saw the Beatles when they were called the Silver Beatles just in some random pub in London, is that true?
Not some pub in London. The Beatles are from Liverpool.
Liverpool, I apologize.
It's okay. Which is where I'm from. And I did stroll in some pub. This is the Cavern. I mean, that's a world famous place now of where the Fab Four, it's like talking about Beethoven, you know. There they were. They were called the Silver Beatles. They just come back, as I found out later. I didn't know who the hell they were. But they were called the Silver Beatles then, and they just come back from Hamburg, and they were really this really tight band. But they weren't singing any of their own songs. They were covers of Chuck Berry and all that, and Little Richard. And they were fantastic, really. And you know, it wasn't till 18 months later, I was selling coffee in my car driving around Yorkshire, and I had the BBC Live program on, and they were doing a show on the Beatles from Liverpool. And there they were live in the studio in Manchester, so it was fun. You know, I was like, oh my God, they're doing well, these boys.
So, Tank Girl is one of the best comic to movie adaptations. Were you familiar with the British comic before taking the role, and how did you become involved with the film?
Well, simply I was just asked to do it, you know, and I thought it'd be fun, you know. I think a lot of it's good. I just think it misses somewhere, but, you know, I'm glad that people like it. They do. So I just don't want to go in and spoil it for them, tell them why I don't love it. But, I enjoyed playing that part, you know. It was sort of fun and, you know, larger than life, chewing a bit of scenery and talking about water. You know, it was fun. Yeah, it was great. And no, I tell you what, I don't like the film. I'm not that fond, because I remember we shot it in Tucson, Arizona, in a disused copper mine, about 130 degrees. So that wasn't much fun. But I remember bashing the thing and smashing this big glass, huge glass mat behind me. And when I went like this, the prop man had a gun and had to shoot out the glass where I hit. And I was real nervous he was going to shoot my hand off. So, you know, it's funny what I'm thinking when I see it. I always think of that, of course. You know. But it turned out pretty good, and I love Laurie Petty. You know, she's terrific. And Naomi Watts was in it. And I knew Naomi from before, and you know, I'm thrilled that she's had such a great career, you know, living in the shadow of the other Australia.
I guess you're talking about Nicole Kidman, isn't it?
That's the one I'm talking about. The tall one.
So, with Clockwork being so ingrained in pop culture, do you remember a time just in your everyday life where Alex or the movie was brought up that you were taken aback by?
No. I think I've heard every question there is to be had about that film. And you know, when I made the film, you know, I was a young actor who was, you know, at the start of my career. I did not like just being known for one damn movie. In fact, I rather resented the damn movie, and I refused to talk about it for the first 5 years. I went, next, I'm on to something else. And I didn't like the movie because that's all people were obsessing on, you know, and I was doing other things. And nobody likes that. I mean, gee, get over it, you know. Let's move on, guys. Well, here we are, 44 years later, and yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. It's, it was a phenomenal experience, of course. You know, Kubrick, you think, my God, a master director, but the truth is that, well, why he's so brilliant is that he casts the right person, and then he has this way of getting out of you somehow. And not in the same way that Lindsay Anderson did. Lindsay Anderson, I would say, is a much more sympathetic director. You know, he was wonderful with his actors. He was used to dealing with actors. Kubrick didn't like actors, and he mistrusted them. He didn't even like them. He wanted to fire them all the time. I had to beg him, don't fire him. Jesus, he's good, just talk to him. I mean, do you want me to talk to him? I mean, he was terrible. You know, he didn't have any patience. And he was obsessed with, do they know their lines? As it stands, knowing the lines is the least of it. He goes, no, I can't shoot it. I went, I know, but that's not what acting is, knowing your lines only. It's the whole thing between the lines. And, you know, so we'd have this banter all the time. But he was strange. I mean, he used to go like this to me, Malcolm. And when he did this, I knew somebody was going to be fired. And we'd walk outside and he'd go, what do you think? And I go, well, I think they're great. I'd always say, I think they're great, Stanley, but they do need you to give them a bit of direction. And he goes, I don't have time for that. I'm going to get rid of them. Gone. Now, the time when he chose someone, kind of, I think he chose a stuntman to play an eminent doctor at the end. And he's supposed to be an eminent surgeon who's been knighted by the Queen for services to the medical profession. So obviously a well-educated man. He goes and chooses a stuntman. I mean, nothing against stuntmen here, but they're hardly the most well-educated of people at the best of times. And I say, gone to a university, blah, 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 all that. So they're walking in, and he's supposed to be Sir something or whatever. And this guy goes, well, how are we doing today, little Alex? You all right? And I'm in bed, and I went, Stanley? No. What's the matter? I went, oh, excuse me. You didn't hear him? Are you not listening on those bloody cams? I went, listen, the next take, listen. So he goes, how are you doing today, little Alex? You all right? All right, are you? And I see Stanley just suddenly take the things off and just laugh. Cut, okay. Fire. Hook. So we stopped shooting for half a day. recast. Then the guy who played the minister goes, well, I have a friend. Get him! Okay, yeah, he's in. So he appeared the next day. And we went on and shot it. Stanley goes, is he well educated? He goes, well, he can speak English, Stanley. Oh, good. Okay.
So you were cast as Dr. Loomis in Halloween, taking on a role that was made famous by the great Donald Pleasance.
Yeah.
What did you want to do something completely different? Did you use some of him as inspiration? How did that go?
Well, I never saw it, so I didn't even have a problem. There was no question me copying it, because I didn't see it, and I still haven't seen it. So I just did my own Loomis. I mean, I can imagine, look, what Donald did, you know, he did Sinister better than anyone I know. I mean, he was an amazing actor. I knew him, you know, to have a drink at the bar in the Royal Court Theatre in London. And I knew his daughter, Anna Pleasance, and so, you know, I didn't really have to see it to know what he did. And but you know, if you're asked to do something, you have to do your own thing. You can't just copy what this terrific actor did, because you know, you would definitely fail. You have to make it your own. And then when I did the first one, which was a lot of fun, I love working with Rob Zombie. He's a tremendously talented guy. And we had such a blast, you know, on set. Then the second one, you know, I nearly didn't do it. The Weinsteins didn't want to pay me, etc., etc. So I'm just playing golf, you know, on my golf course, just not worrying about it. And they're shooting, and they're pushing Loomis back in the schedule, and waiting for when they finally have to pay, which they did. And so then I scoot off back to Atlanta and start shooting, and I said to Rob, I don't want to play the same Loomis as I played. I'm going to get bored. He goes, what do you have in mind? I mean, you know, let's make him a total prick now. He goes, I like that, because you're the only one that's profited from these murders. I went, I love it. You've written a book. Oh, perfect. And you've been a total asshole. I love it. And there's a very funny scene that they do on a talk show, and they have Crazy Al, or what's his name?
Weird Al Yankovic and Chris Hardwick.
Yeah, what's he called?
Weird Al Yankovic.
Weird Al. That's right. He said, have you met Weird Al? I went, hello, Mr. Weird. And he's a very funny guy. So we did that bit together, and it was a lot of fun. It was all improvised, you know. It was fun, and I enjoyed it very much. The PR, the lady playing Elizabeth, playing the PR lady, was incredibly good. She was an improv thing, so we could just make up the scenes as we go along, and the whole deal. So it was a lot of fun. And then there's a kind of redemptive thing at the end, and then you don't know whether Loomis is killed or not. Well, as there's no, you know, Halloween 3, new 3, I guess he's killed. So I don't know. I don't know whether I'll be coming back. But if they do it, I'll come back. It's too much fun. And what kind of a doctor, by the way, is Dr. Loomis? 17 fucking years? Curing this fucking monster? The guy breaks out and kills half the town. Nice job, Doc.
It's like Stuart Government. Did you really receive death threats after killing Captain Kirk in Star Trek Generation?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think they were all Shatner's family. He's a hoot, that man, I have to say. You know, I never got to work with Leonard, but I will say, as he passed yesterday, sadly, that I did meet him at a convention. And he was one of the most extraordinary and beautiful people I think I've met in business. We had a beautiful lunch together. I think it was in Calgary, and he was fascinated, to hear about my stuff, and I wanted to talk to him, of course. And, if it wasn't for Leonard and Bill Shatner, you wouldn't be seeing Star Trek now. It would never have been the cult thing that it became, and the huge money-spinning operation that it became. And it's really down to Leonard and to Bill, of course, those two primarily, even though it was a terrific cast, but, the sets, when you look at them now, you laugh at the cardboard sets and the whole thing. But, those two, with their charisma and their chemistry and their absolute unique talent, really made that franchise. And these other guys, Patrick Stewart, get down on your knees, Patrick, and kiss their feet.
Wow.
Well, thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Malcolm McDowell.
Thank you.